Aloha, malolele, and welcome to the Let's Talanoa Podcast. I'm your host, Kepu, and today we have a special guest. We have here Elijah Lemusuifeauaali'i, all the way from Sydney, Australia. And just how I know Elijah is that we both went to school in BYU, Hawaii, and I think we added each other on social media. But I watched a video about identity, hybrid identity, and something like that. And I was like, man, I really like how Elijah talks and like just the wisdom behind in his words. So I added you on Facebook, and I've just been following the stuff that you post, and I'm like, man, I think it's really cool what you do, and just seeing you. And we're gonna get into it later. I see you published your works and all that stuff, so I'm excited to get into all of that. But yeah, we have here Elijah, and I'm going to let him introduce himself and where he's from. Go ahead.
Talofa, kia ora and g'day. Thank you, Kepu, for the introduction. Yes, my name is Elijah Lemusuifeauaali'i. I was born and raised in Brisbane, Australia, and later on I moved to Sydney, which is now where my family lives. I am a Samoan and a Maori. On my father's side, I come from the villages of Malie, Eva, and Lefanga in Upolu, Samoa. And on my mother's side, I come from the tribes of Ngāti Porou, Te Whanua Panui, and Te Whanua Marahaere Muri in the east coast of New Zealand, North Island. But I do very much represent Fiji. That's where I served my mission in 2014 to 2016. And since then, I have been very heavily involved in the Fijian community back home in Australia, and especially here in Hawaii as well. I'm 24. I'm a senior now in my senior years for Brigham Young University. Double major in cultural anthropology and Pacific Island studies. Malo.
Malo, thank you. I did not know you were double majoring. That's impressive. That's a hard thing to do a double major. I just did one, and that was I almost drowned. But yeah, like I love how you talked about that's another thing I never noticed. I just went off of what was on your social media. You have Maori. You represent the Maori planet. All right, that's awesome. And I just realized your new profile picture is what do you call them? The tribals? Is it a moko?
Tāmoko, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. Yeah. And that was for the kahuku thing that
Yes, yeah. We helped out. So me and the other Māoris, I was more of just a side support, but we helped the kahuku kids out with their performance.
All right. It looks mean, bro. So the purpose of this podcast and why you kind of started it is that it started out with mental health, and that's something I'm still working on. Trying to get some doctors in here to talk about specifically about that, but then developed into my motto for the podcast is to inform, educate, and inspire. And when I saw your story and just following your story, and I'm like, I think Elijah is going to be an amazing addition to this, just seeing his aspirations to be an anthropologist. And I saw your recent post about what was it? It was a Talanoa session too that you just recently hosted, yeah?
Yeah.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about your journey and your aspirations to be an anthropologist, like how it started out and how it's going right now and where you're headed?
Sure. In regards to the Talanoa session, that is part of a class I'm taking right now for spring. I'm taking the ethnography class by Dr. MacArthur. And part of that class is that we have to conduct a ethnography research on a particular culture or social group here at BYU Hawaii, or just in Hawaii in general. And I chose to I chose my topic on neo-colonialism, which is a follow-up topic on a previous paper I wrote last year. And so, yeah, I'm focusing on neo-colonialism in the Pacific, primarily Polynesia, not so much Melanesia or Micronesia. And so with that, I wanted to conduct this research amongst students here at BYU and professors who are either in the Pacific Islands Department or Anthropology Department, or are professors of Pacific Island ethnicity. Okay. And basically, I just wanted to compare and contrast answers, opinions, thoughts between students and professors, an academic view against a more non-academic view. And so that's how the Talanoa sessions came about. For that, I'll be hosting another one this week on Wednesday at the Little Theatre, again, 8 o'clock. But in regards to an anthropologist, it's interesting. It just kind of came about. I wasn't planning to go down this pathway. I actually just wanted to do Pacific Island Studies as one major and graduate. That's it. I was supposed to graduate last fall. I had planned to graduate within 3 years, but seeing as my visa was still valid for another year, I thought, okay, let's try this anthropology pathway, see if I can chuck another major on my, on my profile.
All right.
So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's how that came about. But I guess to go back to some of the things that you've mentioned, also the videos and things I've been doing, those two came about out of natural interest. I started doing those videos purely out of an interest to apply what I was learning in school.
Okay.
The first video I did was I called it Afatahi, kind of a play on the word Afakasi. And a lot of that was based out of my own experience being a Afakasi or half-caste, Pacific Islander. And a lot of what I was learning at the time in Pacific Island Studies, I felt it really lined up. So I thought of this idea to create a poem. I've always liked poetry, especially some of Queen Charlotte's poetry as well. Right. I read a lot of prose. And so I wrote a poem, but I've never released it out to the public until there was this talent show that was hosted in 2019, I believe. And that's where I actually got up and shared my poem, because we needed somebody to fill in a gap. Someone had pulled out. Someone had pulled out. They said, Elijah, can you do something? I was like, oh, okay. So I got up and I shared that poem, and everybody loved it. And then I thought, okay, let's take it a bit further. I'll turn it into a little video, a little film clip. And once I had made that clip, I had no idea it would go viral. So really, I think all of these little steps, all of these little moves that I've been making just naturally, and without any real purpose to be an anthropologist, somehow prepared me, or is preparing me to go down that anthropological pathway.
Oh, wow. I can relate to you in that level, because this podcast I never thought this is something I would do. But yeah, it all lined up to I wanted, when I was in high school, we did a video competition, and I thought to myself, I really like doing this. I want to tell the untold stories of the common people.
Yeah.
That was way back 2009, 2010.
Yeah.
And that nothing really developed in that. Then mission, obviously you get to talk to a lot of people, serving as a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I learn about their stories, and I'm really interested about stories like Talanoas, and then I don't know, political science. I graduated in political science, and a lot of it has to do with people. Like, yeah, like a lot of people focus on policies, but like for me, studying political science, I'm like, it's about the people, right? It's always about the people.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, like 6 months ago, I keep sharing my stories. I never post videos and stuff, but I just talk to people. But yeah, you're right. Like, and then here I am, like 5 episodes in, and I'm just like, no plans, but I'm here.
Exactly.
But yeah, like, and yours journey, because I was like Facebook stalking you for like this past couple of weeks, just like reading the stuff that you've done and just like checking out. I seen that like you even joined like a radio program.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about that?
So yeah, that too kind of came out of nowhere. Back home during COVID, when COVID first came about here in America, the university gave the opportunity to the students to go home. So I took it, especially since they were paying for the flight. So I took it. I went back home. I went back to Brisbane, actually, because that's where my mother lives. So I went to go stay with my mother, and I had a family member, my auntie, who is Niuean, actually. So that's on my Niuean side. I have some Niuean blood down the line.
That's right.
But
It's a new show, yeah.
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 So she was saying that she wanted to start a radio show for Niueans, like, to speak in Niuean. Everything would be done in Niuean, just like you have the Tongan radio show, the Samoan radio show. And I said, oh, cool. That's a great idea. And she said, can you help me? I said, sure, why not? And my Niuean isn't as good and fluent as my auntie, but sure, I'll give it a go. And so we ended up working a few things out. We kind of branched off from the Tongan radio show. So we work with the Tongan radio show as another branch of them. And then I ended up just doing the all the music, the DJ, and all that sort of thing. And my auntie was the main radio host. Yeah, I did that for about 4-6 months.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And was that different? Did you do a podcast too?
So that was different too. In addition to going home, I conducted another research, I guess.
Oh, okay.
And part of that research was interviewing people for that research, and I wanted to record all of that research. So I actually paid a cousin of mine who was a videographer to video record all of our interviews.
Oh, okay.
And so once we all collected them, edited them, whatnot, instead of releasing it as a one whole documentary, I released it as individual videos. Yeah, episodes, yeah.
Man, well, like, how do you find the time to do all of this? Like, you're a busy man.
I'm single, that's why.
All right, listeners, there you have it. We have that's really cool, man, because one of the things that I did is that I went and I was reading, kind of like, because it's like a heavy read though. You have officially published 2 articles. And I read the TANI one and the agent structure one.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, like I felt like I was back in school just reading all. I'm just like, what does this word mean? I don't know what this word means. But do you want to talk about the TANI episode? Before we get into the articles themselves, do you want to talk about the publication stuff? I see you had a mentor, Inari, last name Inari. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the cool things was that one of the cool things being back home and doing that research I did was I was able to network with a lot of people.
Okay.
And one of the people I got to network with was Lemusuifeauaali'i Inari, who was a PhD student
Oh, wow.
for the Bond University of Australia. And he's very pro-Pacific. You know, if any Pacific Islanders trying to make their way in academics, he's very very supportive of that. And, you know, I explained my story to him, what I'm trying to do. And he actually reached out to me and said, hey, let's get this published. You know, let's turn this into an actual piece of academia, you know.
Oh, wow.
An actual scholarly work.
Yeah, yeah.
I kind of laughed at the beginning. I was like, oh man, I'm just a uni student, you know.
Yeah.
But he really, with his help, he really kind of transformed my perspective, you know, of how well I can use my time, even as an undergraduate.
Right.
So once I had finished all the research, I did up the report, and he and I worked together, just editing, adding, take away, and then through his connections that he has to different universities, we got it published. We got it published with the Te Kaharua Journal of Pacific Issues.
Wow. And how many more are you going to do with him? Because I've seen you done 2 with the same guy. Are you looking in the future to do more publications?
Yeah. Currently, I'm still working on. I'm working on 2 papers at the moment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he and I, well, we're good friends now. So we're just gonna, I guess, take advantage of that friendship, that relationship, and let's publish as many things as we can.
Man, here's a question that we can maybe, it's maybe not as a deep question than what I think it is, but like, what is your advice? Because it sounds like you're just utilizing resources left and right. You're taking the opportunities. And I admire that, because like that's what you need to do. Like, it sounds like you're just a hustler. You're hustling out here in academia. What is your advice, or what would you say to Pacific Islander students out there to help them in regards to doing stuff like this, like just utilizing the resources that's in front of you?
You know, when I first came to BYU Hawaii, I was like any other new student, and I was like any other Pacific Islander. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do Pacific Islander studies because I've always had, I guess, a passion for the Pacific. But in terms of what that would lead to, or what that would actually give me a career in, I didn't know. But one thing I realized is that BYU Hawaii, particularly for students here at BYU Hawaii, there are opportunities everywhere. And I've mentioned this before to friends, you know, there are opportunities everywhere, but you have to have the ability to see them.
Okay.
You may not see them for what they might benefit or merit you down the road, but you have to be able to see them as an opportunity and not just something, oh, that's dumb. Oh, now they're just doing that. Who cares? Let's go do this, you know. Not to degrade or say different things that people choose to do are wrong, but you have to have that openness about different things around you. You know, for example, I became the president for the Australian Club in 2019. I was really reluctant. To do that, just because I knew how much time that would require. Plus, it was a chapter or a club that has, I guess, very few students, not a lot of rep, not a lot of image in terms of school socially. So we would have to build that up, you know. But I ended up taking it, and I gave it my all. And the opportunities, the people I got to network with, the resources I came to know that are offered here at BYU opened my mind up completely. Right. And I just took advantage of those, you know.
Yeah, that's amazing. From what I've heard so far is that you could be the poster child for like Pacific Islander students using everything that is given to you to the fullest advantage. Because you're out here, like you've written articles. That's crazy, man. Like, and you have two more coming, and you're working with you keep saying networking.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, and that's what we're supposed to do here. Because
Yeah.
you got connections with the Tongans, you got connections with the Fijians, you got
Yes.
connections with the Samoans. Because I see you like doing these activities with all these different people, and I think that's amazing. I think that's very admirable, and that's amazing of you to make the most out of your education,
Yeah.
doing the most that you can, and you're producing. That's what's so cool to me, is that you're producing materials for academia while you're a student, right? You don't have
Yeah.
to wait to get your PhD or whatever
Yeah.
to create stuff. You're out here already doing it. That's crazy. And you've worked alongside some of the greats, like in as far as Pacific knowledge is concerned, that I know of. I know you've worked alongside people like Lemusuifeauaali'i. You were learning from Kaili.
Tuyone Pulotu when I was
Tuyone.
a carver.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, learning from these like elders and just the people blazing the path?
Yeah, for sure. I've always had an appreciation for the elders.
Mm.
I think that stems from my growing up as the oldest child. I guess, you know, as the oldest child in any given family, you generally have your mindset is a bit more wiser than your younger siblings, you know, and you come to appreciate that wisdom you see in other people as well. And the elders, of course, are great examples of people of wisdom. My time as a carver, excuse me, my time as a carver at the PCC, I got to work with Tuyone Pulotu, Doug Christie, Jared Pere, all master carvers in their own rights. And the wisdom that they taught me in carving is not just applicable to carving, but life itself also. You know, how you carry yourself in the art form, how you move with it, you know, what tools you use really demonstrates what kind of person you are. For example,
Wow.
if you're somebody who's quick to use a machine over a doki, you can kind of tell, okay, this guy's seems to be a bit of more contemporary carver rather than someone who's traditional, who likes to keep the art form, you know, natural, I guess. But sorry. But in saying that doesn't mean it's wrong if you use a chainsaw over a doki, but it does demonstrate those characteristics. But having worked with, you know, Ulisse, Kaili, all of those relationships came out of just random experiences that I like. Ulisse, I met him through carving. He came to the carving shop asking if he could use any logs because he was doing I think he was teaching some keiki at a local school and he wanted to do tapa. And so hey, do you guys have any logs we can use to do the tapa on? Oh, okay, yeah. See what we can find. And then I had no idea he was an academic. Had no idea he was half Hawaiian, kanaka maulu. But you know, those little experiences, those little opportunities,
right?
You gotta take advantage of them because you never know what will merit from them.
That's so cool because I thought you just like connected through academia, but it's just like these everyday interactions that eventually turned into like good relationships.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. One of the things that whenever I see you, your poem comes back to me.
Okay.
And I'm just like, man, that's so true. Because that's something that I talk to a few people, because only a few people I feel like that I know of like really sit down and ponder the significance of it, like the different identities that we have.
Yeah.
And especially for you, right? Because like you have all these cultures that you have to rep. I only identify with Tongan because that's all I know. But ever since I've been here, I went and did the whole ancestry thing. And I found out there's a high, like 40% of my blood is Samoan. And then I was like, that's random. I never knew this. So I talked to my mom and I found out that my great grandfather is full-blooded Samoan. And then my biological father, his grandma is full-blooded Samoan too. I always thought I was full Tongan for the longest time, right? But that's out of ignorance too, like, because I never really asked, didn't really care. But in a place like Hawaii, it forces you to really look into like your past, your ancestors, right? Because out here, like when you ask a Hawaiian, like what are you? They're always like, oh, I'm like 5 different ethnicities. And I think that's really cool because now I identify as like Tongan, Samoan, and German. There's like some German blood there. And so when I heard your poem, I was like, huh, that's interesting. That's something that I talked to like 2-3 people, and I like they understood it. Because when I try to talk to other people that doesn't really care for that stuff, they're like, yeah, or you could just be Tongan. So maybe like, you know, do you want to talk more about the poem and just like the journey of like you as someone who like talk about evolving identities in Pacific? Because the poem presents a really, really unique perspective, because you have like the Samoan, the Australian, the Maori background all in you, but like sometimes how real islanders look at you, they're just like, you're plastic. That's like that's like the go-to. Sure. Yeah, that's like the go-to. Like, what does that even mean? But yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So when I was writing the poem, I guess I should say like a lot of these poems come from personal experiences. That's where I feel they really stem from. But when I was writing that poem, the TANI hybrid identities one, I was trying to focus on the identities of not just myself, but I guess using myself as a base, but the identities of Pacific Islanders today in the world. And I really emphasized Australia because, you know, that's where I grew up. And in Australia, there are so many different types of identity, or like so many Pacific Islanders with multiple identities, you know. There's Samoan Māori, Samoan Tongan, Māori Tongan, Italian Māori, Fijian, you know. There's so many there. And I wanted to kind of emphasize the cultural identity, of course, but also our historic identity and how our identity as Pacific Islanders has changed through history and culture, of course, too. You know, in the beginning of that poem, I talk a lot about how we were represented in the olden days, how we were described by scholars and discoverers who came to the islands. And I think one of the lines I talked about, you know, they called us savages, but they needed us to prove their initiatives, and that kind of comes from, you know, the settlers coming to our islands mainly to colonize us, but you know, they came up with all these things to justify their colonizing, in a matter of speaking. So yeah, that's kind of the intro. That's how I build up the poem. You know, what we were represented as in the old days, and then how we're represented now you know, those identities we still carry with us, you know. I mean, yes, we were called savages in the old days, but it's up to us how we choose to view that as a good or a bad. For me personally, I accept that that is how we were described in the olden days by outside people. And I fully take that on, you know, because when the Maori do the haka, we get savage.
True.
You know, Niue is still called the Savage Island.
You know that.
But I wanted to emphasize how identities have changed, particularly now for those people or Pacific Islanders who are living in Western countries, who were brought up in the diaspora. You know, they don't have the choice whether they can live in the diaspora, live in a Western country, or live in the islands. But they do have a choice in how they choose to represent themselves and how they choose to accept themselves. Going back to myself, I'm a Samoan and a Maori, but I was raised in Australia, so I have 3 identities already. Two identities by culture, but the third by geographical placement, my Australian identity. And then you add to the mix of my mission, where I don't identify myself as a Fijian, but I do have a lot of respect and a lot of admiration and passion for their culture, having spent so much time there. As someone told me once, I'm not a Fijian by blood, but I'm a Fijian by heart. But we have to understand and recognize all of these identities, whether they be geographical, historical, spiritual, gender identities, you know, LGBT, cultural identities. I think it is important that we need to recognize and acknowledge these, because by understanding yourself or your identity on a deeper platform, you're more better and more able to navigate your life in terms of things you want to do, in terms of things you enjoy, in terms of what you want for yourself, how you see yourself, how you want others to see yourself. You know, for example, I was always called half Samoan and half Maori. That's what I always called myself as well. But that's only because that was what was told to me. I'm half Samoan, half Maori. Today, I see myself as a full Samoan and a full Maori, despite not knowing little bits and pieces of my culture here and there, because I do know a lot, but there are certain things I'm still learning. But does that diminish my identity? Does that make me any less worthy of my identity? Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because I've always wondered, what's the discussion on that? When like my wife, right? She's by birth, she's half Tongan, half Scandinavian.
Oh, wow.
But she was adopted by Palangi parents. And so culturally, she's raised American, right? And now that ever since she's been in BYU, she's learned a lot about her ethnic cultures, right? Her Tongan, like I was able to convince her to do the culture night dances with me and just do all this fun stuff. And that was emotional for me to watch her do that, because as an immigrant to the United States, I'm coming and I'm going to live here and I'm going to live the American lifestyle. But as I've gotten older, my culture has gotten very important to me. And that's something I definitely want to pass on. Because both my grandpas weren't really in the mix, but I grew up raised by my grandmas, and they were old school. Like they did stuff old school. I remember growing up drinking and eating nonu or noni in the morning,
Oh, yeah.
every Saturday morning. And they would drink the vaipala, like the herb stuff. I did the whole 9 years growing up doing all of that, and the whole respect system.
Yeah.
I grew up doing my grandma, we would make food on Sunday, and she would send me with 4 different plates to the 4 different corners, do all that stuff, right? So I was raised up old school. And so as I've gotten older, I'm definitely my culture, and I think maybe it's because of the memories that it connects me to my ancestors, to my grandparents. It's gotten more important to me, and like I want to pass it on to, because I know they're going to live in America, they're going to be Americanized, and there's nothing bad about that, but
Yeah.
it's just the fact that I don't want their tongue and identity to die because they're not there geographically. So I tell my wife all the time, like, well, they're going to speak English everywhere else, but in my house, I'm only going to speak Tongan.
Yeah.
So they learn it and understand it, right? We'll see when we actually get the kids here how that's going to go. But yeah, back to what I was saying, like, it's pretty cool. It was really emotional for me to watch her go sing and dance in Tongan and be like, yeah, like, be proud of it. That's who you are. Like,
For sure.
that's who you are. Yeah? You're not just half Tongan. You're like you said, you're Tongan. You don't need to say half or full. Like, you're just Tongan.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
I definitely want to add though, you know, I would say not to ignore those, like, those people who are just, one culture, for example, like just Samoan or just full Tongan or whatever. Not to ignore those guys, but I think it is important that they appreciate and take a chance, or take a chance to be in take a chance to be in the shoes of those who are multi-ethnic, or multiracial, whatever term you want to use, because you'll realize that those people who have multiple identities, culturally at least, the pressure is so much greater for them. And the demand is so much heavier, because now they have to learn Samoan and Māori, Samoan and Tongan and Fijian and whatever,
And it's not just the language, it's the protocols too.
It's everything,
right.
And, I think that's something a lot of people ignore. A lot of people just assume, like, they'll be good at both, or they'll be able to learn both languages, or there's the other one that's, you have to choose which one you're going to be more, Samoan, Tongan, Fijian, Māori, Why do we need to choose? Why can't we be both? Why can't we embrace all of our cultures? For example, my one of the Tongans here at BYU asked me, Elijah, why do you speak Tongan? Like, why do you do all these Tongan things? You're not Tongan. But she meant it like she was curious to know, not in a mean way. And I said to her, for example, in Pacific culture, for example, in Tongan culture, you guys say tauhiwa, tauhiwa meaning to nurture the space, nurture relationships. For us in Samoans, we say tausiliva, and it's a principle that's shared in a lot of Pacific cultures. So I wouldn't say it belongs to one culture, but if you think about tauhiwa as a Samoan who practices tausiliva, is it not right that I also practice or nurture my vow between us as Pacific Islanders? And so I feel like by learning your culture, by trying to understand you on a cultural level, I'm nurturing that vow between us. I feel like I have a duty to do that.
Wow. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like, yeah, it's hard because there'll always be people that'll gatekeep the cultural stuff, right? And it's as much as we try to keep it the culture alive, there's some who try to keep it pure, and I don't know like what's like, because I'm not an anthropologist, but my observation is that it's changing so much because there's more at least I can speak for myself because I did the research on this, is that there's more Tongans out of Tonga than in Tonga.
Yeah.
And like I imagine it's the same for a lot of the Pacific Islands, is that there's more out than in. And since they're out, like there's a lot of them that only know some or partial, like some don't speak the language, some speak it like bilingually, like Tongan English and all that stuff. So it's hard. I feel like it's hard for people to try and gatekeep that because they don't have a lot of control over it, because they're geographically they're there. There's English is the main whatever language. It's probably harder for the ones that are out in like France and like in Europe, right? Because they have to maintain English, French, and whatever. But I think we should be more mindful of that as we're addressing to each other, because like for yourself you have those 3 identities, like 4, but you're, from your perspective, you're trying to respect the culture by trying to learn the language, learn the protocols, and do it as a Tongan would do it. And I think it's just a message for people out there, like for me, for Tongans out there, is that before we start trying to gatekeep the culture, and like that's another thing, who gets to gatekeep? Why are you speaking Tongan? And I'm like, no, let's just listen. It's a time for like understanding and acceptance. Like we're more global now because of social media and the internet. Instead of just trying to shut down people from different cultures, from different perspectives, trying to learn our languages and trying to do our stuff. Let's be a little bit more understanding. Give him time. Let him talk. Let him speak.
I mean, definitely do it for the right reasons. Don't just go learn all the swear words and then just go use all that with a friend.
Right. True. That's a good point.
And I mean, there are certain things of other people's cultures. For example, Tonga, or for example, Fiji. I'm not a Tongan. I'm not a Fijian. I am learning their culture, but at the same time, I would recommend to others, because this is what I do. I have to always remind myself that at the end of the day, whilst I am a Pacific Islander and we share that collective identity, at the end of the day, I'm not a Fijian. I'm not a Tongan. So there are certain things that I need to respect and that will not be open to me.
Yeah. I feel like we could sit here and talk about this stuff for for a couple hours. I guess just for the sake of time, I try to keep it short for the listeners, and just for the sake of your time. I'll say this before I get to the last question. I just want to say for all of our listeners that Elijah here, for me, represents what I envision, what you call students to do when they go to university, is to, like, when you're presented opportunities, take them. Don't be afraid, right? And there's so many resources out there, not just books and stuff. There's people out there that are willing to help. They're willing to let you stand on their shoulder, and to get better perspectives. And they'll do it willingly. And I think what Elijah has demonstrated for us here is that, like with your papers, like, and the videos that you're producing, like, you don't have to wait to finish school to do something with your education. And I'm grateful that he's out here doing that, and I'm grateful that that he's setting that example. Because somewhere out there, there's another little Elijah. I mean, maybe he doesn't know that he wants to learn anthropology and Pacific Island study, but I'm grateful that you're out here making the right choices, doing what you need to do, and doing what you have done to set an example and be that ancestor someday for someone who's going to read your work and read of your stories and your talanoa and be like, I'm grateful that he did that, because now I have some sort of a standard to follow, like a template, or like someone, a pioneer who's trekked it and left a path for me. And I just want to say that, and I'm grateful that you're doing that. And with that, and with that, what are your words of encouragement for future or aspiring anthropologists and Pacific Island students, Pacific Island study students out there, if they want to pursue what you're doing right now? What is your word of advice for them?
You know, and a lot of people have told me, you know, Elijah, what are you gonna do with Pacific Island studies? You know, like, that's a cool major, no, you get to learn about your culture and everything, but what are you gonna do with it? And I said to them, you know, I'll find something. I'll find something to do with it. And you know, one devotional, Jeffrey R. Holland actually came and he gave a talk. And one of the things he's talked about was our majors or our degrees. And he said that our degrees are our own, or our majors are our own. Our education is our own. You choose and you decide how you will use it for your benefit. So, you know, a lot of people told me your degree is not going to be recognized in Australia. You know, your degree is going to just be just for America. Look what it's achieved me now. Academic, right. Published. I've got videos on social media, multiple networks. I'm not saying, you know, I'm not saying I'm successful, but I'm building something.
Right.
You know, I'm creating something. So for those students who are pursuing Pacific Island studies, the options are limitless. The only limitation, as cliche as it sounds, is yourself.
Right.
You can take Pacific Island studies and apply it to anything you like. Apply it to mental health, apply it to the church, use it in academia, use it in the workplace. I mean, because I'm able to, I guess, have this transparency where I can talk to the Fijians, I can talk to the Samoans, I can mingle with the Tongans, and, you know, it's given me the ability now I can mix with the Niueans, because Niuean and Tongan is very similar. Samoans and the Tokelauans, the Tuvaluans, like, the options are limitless. You just, again, you have to be able to recognize them, see them.
All right, thank you so much. There you guys. There you have it, guys. You heard it from Elijah, and I'm grateful once again for accepting the invitation to be on the Let's Talanoa podcast. Malo Aupito. And hopefully, in the future, we'll probably send another invite once you're out there doing more anthropological work. Is that a word?
Yeah.
We'll send you an invite, and maybe we can do a second episode and follow out what you've done so far. I'm excited to read more, because I really got into your Re-Evolving Identities of Pacific Island Studies. I was reading it because it's very interesting to me. And I saw the structures too, because it involved the Langis in Tonga.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's cool. But I'm interested to see what you produce next. And I'm a fan. I'm reading the stuff. I'm grateful that you got on here and shared your knowledge and shared your talanoa. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.